Well, thank you guys all for coming. We're just kind of working through to make sure that our technology will be working. As you know, we're trying to live stream it so that if any parents or families aren't able to attend, that at least they can watch online. And then depending upon how that goes, we are hoping then to create kind of like a resource bank for you through our website. So if you forget or lose anything, you can always access our PowerPoint information online. But as we know, we have little kids at home sometimes, and so we're hoping just that we will help to where, or even if you're at one of your kids' games and you want to pull it up and watch via live stream, we're trying to make that happen so that you can be a part of it, even if you're not present
so
here.
I just did it to our default string.
Just a couple housekeeping things. We have a sign-in sheet which has your name and email, phone. Email is important because I don't know our copier printed it out and it's hard to read, so we'll email you this PowerPoint so you can visually see it better and refer to it. And then we obviously are looking to create and sustain a community of sharing information with parents and just building that networking and collaboration with our parents within Huntley District 158. So thank you all for attending and being here today. We look forward to discussing our topic of IEP versus 504. A couple other housekeeping things. We'll do introductions, but before we do that, again, there's water pop, cookies. Next time we'll have coffee. First time, we're just going to see how it goes and what we need to tweak. And the Post-its, you'll see if questions come up in a rise, just write it. Questions before we get started on introductions or anything you need?
This is I didn't have it on. It's on now.
Well,
Okay.
I will start while they work through their technology piece. My name is Monica Furlong, Director of Special Services, pre-K through 5th grade. So I just started July 1st. A little bit about my educational background. I did speech therapy for 4 years and then went into the self-contained classrooms to be a special education teacher. Then from there went into administration. So I'm going to my 3rd year now as a Director of Special Services. It's been a wonderful experience thus far at Huntley. A lot of fantastic, amazing things going on, and we look as a department of how we can improve and even continue to grow and develop within our special services department. So I look forward to working with all of you and on this collaborative journey. So welcome.
Thank you all for coming. Kind of reiterating the welcome to tonight's first parent committee meeting. My name is Kevin Wolf. I'm Director of Special Services for 6th grade through 21. My background has been in social work for the first 11 years of my career, and then for the past 4 years I've been a building administrator for special ed at the high school level. It's been a great start to the year, I think. A lot of smiles from kids, a lot of interaction in the classroom with students and teachers, and I think we're starting off on a great foundation and look forward to the great things to come for the rest of the year, and look forward to getting to know more parents in the district, and again kind of reiterating the idea of this is a journey for all of us, and that's one of the things that I will be continuing as a message with our staff is as students come into the district or as students are identified for services, it's a journey that we're on to help them get to the next step that they need in their life, both academically and then post-secondary as well. So thanks for being here tonight. We look forward to spending the next hour and a half roughly talking about IEPs and 504s. If we can just kind of whip around the table and just do introductions. Name, what school your student's at, and if there's anything else you feel like you want to share.
I always like if there's something positive experience that you've had at Huntley or any type of activity your kids are in or just something unique about your child. It's always nice.
I'm Shannon Brown. My daughter Haley Brown is in Huntley High School. She's a junior, and she has a 504 because she has migraines, and she does have ADHD, but it's more geared toward her migraines. She's in theater, musicals.
Wonderful. Awesome, thank you. Wonderful.
My name is Delia Romero, and my son's in third grade, Diego. He's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
And just thank you for this, because a lot of times we go to the IEP and it's what they tell us. You know, he's doing this, he's doing that, but it's like, well, how can I do better? Where do I turn? Who do I turn to get more help for him for when he's in high school? You know, what is he? How do I get him there?
Yeah.
How about when he gets out of school? How is he going to get a job? So, thank you.
My name is Lori Chappie. My son is Matthew Chappie. He is in ninth grade. We're doing the high school transition. Lots of fun. And I'm just seeing whatever sports might be available to him at the high school level to ease the transition. Just been a little bumpy.
Okay.
I'm Andy Clemens. I'm a special service coordinator. I've actually been in Marlow. This is my 12th year. I've taught at Marlow, for 11 years, and this is my first position in administration. So, you know, we've had a great start to the beginning of the year, and you know, opening this up to you guys, I think, is great. Looking back as a teacher, this would have been great for parents to have. So.
Katie Winwick, and my daughter was on an IEP, started at the end of last school year. And I just started working for the school district this year, and so I'm new in many ways with this whole process. And I definitely appreciate too that you're doing this meeting for all this, because I had no clue where to start last year. Where do we go with this? What is this? And oh my gosh, how many papers do I have to sign, and what paperwork is this? Really? You know, we'll work on that. But anyhow, so yeah, I'm glad to be here and learn some more too.
My name is Leslie Karras. My husband Tom and I have Tyler. He's been in the come through since the early intervention program when it was at Martin. From there, and now he's in the 5th grade strategy ed class at Hannah Martin. So we're looking to this year. As an chair myself, I understand the IEP process, but like the transition phases and where to go, because the gap from 5th to 6th is very jump, and some of that, and just to know how to support him best academically and all the other ways. I'm Annette Stoner. I have 2 boys. My oldest is 18 and a senior, and he started with us through the early intervention at North Elementary. Unfortunately, he ended up leaving the district last semester and is now homeschooled, so he's going to be finishing up homeschool at home. And then I have a 6th grader who we're, just doing the best we can. So.
Thank you.
My name is Shanna Workman. My daughter Carolee is in 1st grade at Lahee. She started in the preschool 3 years ago with an IEP with some behavioral kind of things, and I again had no idea the process, anything when we started this, and she's come really far, and I'm very thankful for everything the district offers and has provided for her, and the teachers that have worked with her, and so looking forward to having this additional resource and support for her.
My name is Geraldine Toth. My daughter's name is Rachel, and she's in the 6th grade at Marlow. We've had a kind of difficult transition, so that's why I'm here, pretty much just to learn more and to help her out. We've been in the program since preschool years at Hannah Martin. So.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who are not present but able to watch, welcome everyone, and we look forward to this collaboration. Just to kind of refresh, we wanted to go over, everyone hopefully got the email that listed kind of the topics and dates that we'll be meeting. This is a starting point of just getting some ideas and topics. We use the survey information to guide what topics we're going to be targeting. Everyone here comes to us with different background knowledge, experience, so we left the topics more general and kind of are gathering some information as far as what questions do you have. We sent another, again, survey out to kind of probe some questions so that we can guide our presentation to your needs. Again, we're leaving it kind of general because everybody comes with different experience and knowledge, so some of it might be basic information for you, and for those that it is, please write down questions or anything that you would like to know further in regards to the topics. So basically we will do kind of like an informational session. Today's topics are IEP versus 504. we did create norms for the parent committee. These are just kind of reminders. We are very excited to have this opportunity to work collaboratively with parents and provide networking for parents within our district. Just to remember, communicate in a positive manner and listen attentively. Obviously, as you know, if you need to get up and use the bathroom or take a water break or drinks, help yourself at any time. If you need to excuse yourself. If you have another obligation, please feel free. You don't have to stay the whole time. If you want to stay for a little bit and then come back, we're flexible in that. Obviously, a lot of us come with different views or opinions and background knowledge. We welcome different viewpoints. We just need to respect everybody's viewpoints and opinions and different topics. We do encourage that confidentiality piece within individual students, so another kid's name doesn't get brought up, or just the respect of not identifying individual students. Again, we please ask and welcome questions for clarification. In our special ed world, as you know, we have acronyms and we might use, our goal is to keep it parent friendly. So in the world of special ed and IEP meetings and 504 meetings, a lot of information is thrown out at you. So we're hoping that these information sessions will just reinforce what does that mean. So please ask questions for clarification. We talked about being open to ideas. And again, this is our first time, so bear with us, but we want to honor the time limits and respect, and we know that you guys are extremely busy in your lives, and we're so thankful that you're here tonight, but we want to respect your time and stay on time and stay on topic. So, all right.
We know some people just came in, so we can make room.
Absolutely.
We can all come to the table. Our goal was to avoid like a big presentation where we're standing in front of you. We wanted to try to make it somewhat interactive and a little more personal, so that's why we started with the small table and kind of grew it before we started. Again, the goal tonight is a lot of information sharing. We're going to try to stay to our topics. I know there's some specific questions that have already popped up in some of the information that you've all shared. If tonight isn't the perfect forum for that, I think reaching out to Monica or myself or Andy or Sarah is definitely something you can feel free to do as well. We want all of you to be comfortable with where your kids are at and what's going on, and again, helping you through that process where those stumbling blocks are coming. All right. So here's our goal. Let's see if we're on time. We are pretty close. Pretty close. So the next piece, we're going to start with some compare and contrast of IEPs versus 504 plans. We originally planned to have a breakout, but if there was like 40 people, that made a lot more sense to have a breakout. But we're a smaller group, so I think we'll just move through all the content together and just kind of work through some of the questions we might have in that process. And then towards the end of the evening, you guys will have a chance to network and discuss, compare stories, what are good things that are going on, resources possibly that you utilize in the community. I think as everyone shared about their background a little bit, my goal as a social worker is always when we bring people together to be able to share experiences and kind of learn something from the evening, not necessarily just from the professionals in the room, but from the people that you can see at the Jewel or at Walmart or interactions, so you know there's other faces that can help you on this journey as well in your community. So here we go.
This is just a basic video, just an overview of what a 504 plan is and the difference between an IEP and 504 plan.
Mm-mm.
Perhaps you've heard of a 504 plan. Well, we'd like to explain the difference between a 504 plan and what it is to be in special education or individualized education. So 504, and the term gets thrown around, 504, 504. What it is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. In English,
Sorry.
Civil Rights Act that says that any entity that receives federal funding, and that
Let's
includes
turn it
schools
on.
that
Okay.
501 is justified, cannot discriminate against people on the basis of disability, nor which is when we meet the requirements of the 504 plan, because the 504 plan really is only accommodation. The reverse is not true. Why does all of this matter, okay? Here's why it matters. Let's just say a child has a peanut allergy, and because of a peanut allergy, they need accommodations in school. Perhaps there are certain materials that can't be used in the cafeteria or in the art room because the child is allergic and there's peanuts in that particular equipment or in those particular foods. And so we need to give that child accommodation. There's nothing different about how that child learns. They don't need any specialized instruction in order to access their education, leaving out some other kind of a disability. So that child would probably get a 504 plan. A child who requires specialized instruction requires an individualized education program under the IDEA. Those are easy examples. The harder examples are a student who has, say, an attention deficit disorder. Well, perhaps they need a 504 plan, but if it rises to the level where the child requires individualized instruction and related services, then that child might have an individualized education program. I get brought in a lot where parents have a 504 plan and they don't think it's sufficient. They think the child needs more than just preferential seating or on-time testing. They think the child needs services, someone instructing the child, someone who's trained to instruct the child to remediate the disability. And that's where the dispute comes in. It's easy when it's a peanut allergy, but it's much harder where it's a disability that sort of crosses the edge from a combination of services. And you know how I like to explain it. You've explained
Easier than mine?
a little bit. You've explained it very well, but if I had to just sink it, succinct it down a little bit, I like to say that you can have a disability and have a 504 plan and not, like you said, rise to the level of having an individualized education plan. A 504 plan says, the school says, we recognize the fact that your child has a disability, and we will accommodate him or her, and we will modify things for him and her. But we don't believe that their disability rises to the level that it has an adverse impact on their education, right? And so that's the confusing thing about it. You can still have a disability and get the 504 plan, or you can have a disability and rise to the level of having an individualized education program. So in a nutshell, that's 504. That's 504. Here's the other piece that I think is important. I'm sorry, but I have to say it. Many school districts prefer to give kids 504 plans versus IEPs because it's easier. A 504 plan can be one page and it can say, Johnny will have preferential seating. It's not so easy to comply with the IDEA. It requires a lot more work. Parents have far greater protections under the IDEA, in my opinion, than they do under Section 504. Section 504 is an essential statute, and it applies to a lot of situations that are very important to keep in mind. But very often when a parent calls me and says, I have a 504 plan, and I've been feeling for a very long time that they need services, I sort of roll my eyes because it's not that uncommon that a kid gets a 504 plan when really they're supposed to have an IEP. I think the most important thing is for parents to understand that there is a difference between an IEP, an individualized education program, and a 504 plan. And just knowing that is half the battle, at least half the battle.
So that just gives you a little basis of a little synopsis of 504 versus IEP. And so now we'll get into some of the detailed information.
Monica, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
I won't get us off
yeah.
track. Just for parents, do you think that that video clip would be beneficial for a lot of our parents in the district? Maybe even before even getting that 504 IEP, if we get that posted on there? Because I think it does in a very, the lady, one did it a lot shorter, but was able to kind of give that concise, description of that. Parents maybe would benefit from this. Do you guys think that would be input? I mean, yeah, okay. We're going to get that video clip on.
Perfect. Good.
I think the other thing to keep in mind as they were talking is there's some pieces of that one attorney may interpret slightly different. I think that's something very important. And as we know with IDEA and 504, there are specific requirements that need to be met. How those are met, I think sometimes are interpreted differently by attorneys, by school districts. I would disagree with the woman who said that a 504 is easier than an IEP. I'm not sure that's necessarily true. It's maybe the process is a little less stringent at points in time, but I think it's can be just as tricky or complicated. As we were listening, one of the things I thought of as it was going over the speaker, like thinking of IDEA versus 504. 504 would have been someone turning the volume up, or someone give me an FM system so I can hear it. and IDEA would mean that I need additional instruction to make sure I got all the material that was covered during today's presentation. So it's just, again, another example, and we'll talk through some other things as we go today. But the other thing that I thought was kind of funny, which we'll touch on, is there are a lot of acronyms and a lot of kind of crazy words going out there that you don't use in your everyday life. And I think that's one of the things as administrators, special ed administrators, that we're going to push, is that we want to be as parent and student friendly as possible. And I think that's a reminder that we always need to have, both as administrators but also as practitioners, because we are in the lingo every day, and we don't always do a good job.
Is it kind of like the 504 plan is more like mechanical, and then the other one is like a person explaining, like it's...
That's a great question, and that's exactly where we're going right now. That's a perfect question. That's our segue that we needed. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I have a question. Is it a goal to maybe do a cheat sheet for parents? Because like you said, all of us have different experiences, and I know, like I said, I have the background, but other parents don't, and they're coming in and you're throwing out MVC, MDR, DR, this, LI, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I could see how it could be very overwhelming.
And I think that's another one of the goals of the parent network, is to be able to come up with some of those things that I think we all would recognize that that's important. How that looks and how we transfer that information to families is definitely something that, as a group, that's a good reminder for us, and how can we do that in our buildings to have those resources available for parents. And where are those available? Because the other piece that with live streaming and today's presentation, our goal is to make the special services website or link on the website more of a useful tool. So that could be a great place for where are the hot acronyms. So those definitely can come out of these discussions. So thanks for sharing that.
We also hope that when you're sitting in a 504 meeting or an IEP meeting, as I'm sitting in my own professional development, when you get to an acronym or something that you're unsure of, it should be a conversation where you feel open and comfortable to ask that question. Please feel free in that meeting to say, I need to stop. What does that mean? Describe that to me, because again, we use it in our everyday language, and we're working on how we can communicate that in a more parent-friendly terminology. But if you ever come across, even tonight, we're going to throw out some big language, and please, we want to create that culture and community to where you are asking us questions on what does that mean or describe that. So we want to create that culture, and then also have the resources on the website and in your fingertips, maybe at the meeting, through a document where you can refer to. But we hope that we are sharing what those acronyms mean to you. It's not a secret, it's just there's a lot of different acronyms within our special ed world.
So if we just pick out a few things to kind of look at, the compare and contrast from IDEA and Section 504, they're both federal laws, and that's what drives both of these services. One is 504 is American Disabilities Act, and that is any age fits into that. When we talk about IDEA, it is only for kids from the ages of 3 to the day before their 22nd birthday. And what that looks like is a wide range, and that doesn't necessarily mean, if in kindergarten my son or daughter becomes eligible for services, that you can plan for them to be receiving services up to the day before their 22nd birthday. The goal would be that's not happening in our minds. The goal would be we're helping them transition and get past the obstacles that are adversely affecting their achievement. So that's our end goal always, is to transition out of that, but we also know that's not necessarily realistic for all kids. So that's just another variable to keep in mind.
When you look at the disabilities or eligibility area, IDA has 13 categories in which we can identify their eligibility area. So you've heard acronyms such as specific learning disability, you've heard autism, you've heard developmental delay. There's 13 different categories under IDA that we recognize for eligibility for an IEP. 504, the disabilities are a lot more broad. So again, you could have somebody with diabetes, peanut allergy, and again, the comparison would be through an IEP, they need specially designed instruction at that higher level versus just access to accommodations to function within that general education environment, or to ensure that they are learning in a safe environment as well too.
I think one of the components that often get left out from the 504 world is that there's an evaluative component. So there should be some sort of evaluation that goes along with a 504 plan. It just doesn't happen. It's not because someone comes in and just asks for it. There's a process, and for those families that are involved with students with IEPs, you've been through that evaluative process, which is, it is what it is. Maybe that's the best way to put it. It can be very trying, it can be very demanding. On the 504 side, sometimes we don't see it as demanding because often families will come into schools with a medical diagnosis, and we can often use all that information so we don't have to do any additional evaluation, but there is an evaluation to qualify for services in either component. It just looks different. From the IDEA side, there's a pretty considerable school evaluation that will take place that your child would be involved in, and some components would also include interacting with you as parents.
And note for the 504, you do not have to have that medical doctor diagnosis. We can do our own internal evaluative pieces as well.
Mm-hmm.
We, for both, use a variety of data points and measures. So even if we have outside medical diagnosis, we see how it affects them within their educational environment, how it's impacting them, and we can collect and analyze data too. If we're talking about ADHD, well, we can do our own, rating scales and gather data, because we also need to know the frequency that it's occurring in our school systems, or when it's occurring, and how we can best support it. So we do use a variety of measures through that evaluative piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My daughter, she's actually by her first grade teacher, Holly Blonsky, and Gina Rickard when she was in first grade. And so they did evaluate her then. How often should they be reevaluated for ADHD? I mean, I know she still has it and has difficulties and things like that, but is there a set time, because we go through the pediatrician and they were all collaborative. Very thankful.
Sure.
Is there a time that she should, I mean, she's a junior now.
That's a great question, and I won't, one of the things that Monica and I can't do is speak to past practices. I think moving forward, some things that will be consistent that we expect and as a district will want to be implementing. Some things are required by law. It's required by law every 3 years we reevaluate students' eligibility for services. OCR doesn't necessarily say that it's a reevaluation every 3 years for a 504. Best practice would be taking a look at that every 3 years. Any of the attorneys that we work with, historically I should say, they often, anything 504 connects to IDEA, and if there's a practice that legally is sound for IDEA, you probably are going to do it for a 504 because they're similar. But on a minimum, each year you're looking at your plan, whether it's an IEP or a 504 plan, and reviewing that plan to make sure it continues to meet your students' needs. So definitely on an annual basis, and then required by law for IDA is every 3 years, and best practice, we would be looking to do that for every 3 years for a 504. But again, I think you make a great example. You're continuing to have your students or your child see a doctor, so the diagnosis continues, and this is the question that comes up at the high school age is, and had the question yesterday, so when kids are applying for accommodations for standardized assessments like SAT, if we don't have any documentation that supports why we're providing those accommodations, the College Board will be like, that's fine, but we're not giving accommodations because there's no proof that that child has ever needed that kind of support. So we'll be responsible for making sure we're diligent to help the families and student continue to be able to access those resources.
And sometimes after 3 years, we have the data and we have the information as a team, and we don't necessarily need to go through that formal, very comprehensive, thorough evaluation. So sometimes we do need to, but it might be in the case where we have the data, we have the information, we have the medical diagnosis, we know it as a team. So we're not going to put the student through a full case evaluation when we know that the continued services are necessary. So just the evaluation can look a little different within those 3 years. And parents are a huge part of that. If we come to you at the domain meeting and if you have an area of concern, please voice that at the meeting where we decide which category we're going to evaluate. If you're noticing something at home, like, hey, I'm noticing the distractibility is getting, you're a huge part of this team, and we don't necessarily always see what is happening at home and at school, so please add that in during that discussion of what we are evaluating. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And one of the things you brought up at the very beginning, Kevin, was kind of the IDEA, the IEP is up through their 22nd birthday. They can receive those services. One of the things too for students who have that 504, that can carry on with them. An IEP can as well if they go into a college or university up until that. Say schooling is taking them longer, they go back to school, maybe they take a break after they graduate from high school or going later, they can still receive services for their 504 at a college or university as well, so.
Absolutely. And sometimes you'll see the shift of, we have students that maybe start on a 504 and shift to an IEP, or that's why it was important tonight to discuss both, because we have some that go from a 504 to an IEP to a 504. So we want to make sure you're educated on both, because they may have a disability, but they don't always need that specialized instruction, but we want to recognize that they need accommodations or supports within the classroom that they can have access to through this 504 plan. So even though you haven't heard 504 maybe until tonight, it's important to know what it is, because potentially if you have a child that's on an IEP, they could go to a 504 or the other way. We're looking at what does the student need, and based on educational supports, what level, 504, or do they need specially designed instruction more towards that IEP?
And just a last final note on that is you never have both, which is sometimes a misconception. If you have a medical need that doesn't necessarily need instruction, but you already have the IEP, we will usually just fold that into the IEP for those accommodations because it's appropriate. It still meets the medical needs. So
and
just something.
There's always those unique cases and situations. So we want to consider that when we say, all or nothing, there's always those unique situations that we look at. So typically, our students don't have a 504 IEP because either they're needing that specially designed instruction or they're needing that accommodation plan. However, if you have a student that has, seizure disorder and it's not impacting their educational, we're going to look at a 504
Yep.
plan. So just to kind of say, there are those, cases, it's case by case, but typically a student would not have both.
So just moving to a little bit more about eligibility, I think we've covered a lot of this already. But as far as, sorry, yes.
I was just going to ask, where can you find those 13 categories?
We're going to share about them tonight. One of the things that I think everyone should also be, and the question was, where can we find the 13 eligibility categories? We're going to talk a little bit more about it as we move through the evening, but also ISBE, Illinois State Board of Education, is a great resource for parents as well. If you click on special education, they have a parent network. And more so thinking of that as a parent network resource page is what I meant by that. And they have a lot of other resources that are there. So that's a good starting point. And again, if there's questions, please encourage people to reach out to their case manager. They can answer those questions, or any of the administrators. We can give you either hard copies of that or where you can tangibly find that specific question or anything else.
I think what we're looking to do too is these questions that are coming to us are very important to us. And when I write these down, I heard acronyms, 13 categories. Again, these are things that we just take for granted because we know, and so we're going to build through our website just those resources for you. So if you need to know you're going to an IEP meeting and I want something on behavior, this will take time, but gradually from tonight we plan on putting this on the website and then I can go back and look for the 13 categories or acronyms. So these are things that will be coming through our discussion, and again, please voice what you need from us to better help with the process. So I noted the 13 categories. That's a great question. Also at the IEP meeting, the team should be discussing the eligibility areas. We legally don't predetermine, so they should have that conversation of here's the eligibility areas, but we can dig deeper into what those mean.
I was just kind of wondering if there's a need for a transition from a 504 to an IEP, where those 13, because at the 504 I don't hear the 13 categories.
Sure.
But in the IEP, I do.
Yep.
So if it's needed to move from the 504 to the IEP, is my question, because I haven't seen that looked at.
Most certainly, and we can have the 13 categories and then more of the broad-based categories of the 504. Absolutely, we'll provide that.
So going back to eligibility, in regards to IDEA, there's when you sit down for that IEP, initial IEP or reevaluation, there's 8 domains that the team needs to look at, and that's what we look at as evaluation areas to determine if there's an adverse effect on a student's performance in school. So again, we're going to kind of skip through some things a little bit more quickly at this point, and we'll pick them up later on in the discussion. So when we're looking at those 8 domains, we're asking, is it relevant to evaluate in this area? What do we already know? And what we already know doesn't have to come from just the school of people. Like, we're looking for you guys to share that information as well. And then the team has to ask, what else do we need to know to get a better understanding about about the student to be able to move forward? And then who's going to gather that information?
Some of those domain areas you'll see at the meeting, you'll hear social emotional, communication. Are we looking at functional performance, which means, can they organize throughout their day? So there's different categories, health, that you'll hear about, and those are the specific areas in which we look to assess within our education environment. Eligibility for 504, when you look at, again, it's a little bit more broad. We have physical or mental impairment, and we're looking for the words that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities. With that, there has to be a record of such impairment. So if I break my arm and I know I'm going to have a cast for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, that's not going to be a long enough time frame to where I would need a 504 plan. We as a district are going to provide accommodations for you and supports naturally as we, ensure that all of our students have a safe environment. But we don't necessarily need a 504 plan because it's not a long-term disability that he or she is going to have. So when we look at has a record, it's typically 6 months or more that they've had their disability. And again, major life activities, we're talking walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning. And when you are looking at learning, you think, oh, but then if learning's impacted, why wouldn't it be an IEP? It's the severity of the learning. So if a kid has ADHD, their learning, they might be distractible, is impaired, but with accommodations, they can access the general education curriculum and not need that specialized special curriculum. They might still just need accommodations. Some of the eligibility areas, you're looking at more of a broad base. So again, diabetes, epilepsy, cancer, heart disease, Tourette's, cerebral palsy, depression, anxiety, vision impairments. So again, it's just on that more broad level. Again, we're meeting annually, every year. There's no set time frame. So at an IEP, we look typically around the same time frame. Well, maybe for your student, the beginning of the year in August isn't the best time because it's a new team and you want them to transition into the new team. Or vice versa, maybe you want to meet in September to communicate the changes within the 504. Typically, we have to have it within that year's worth of time. However, parents can always call a meeting for a 504. So if something happened over the summer and you want a meeting in September, you always have that right to contact us and ask for a 504 IEP meeting. But legally, 1 year, and then every 3 years we reevaluate. This is just a little visual. When we talk about all students within our educational environment and system, we have, here's another acronym. Again, I do it unintentionally. RTI, which is response to intervention. And that just allows all of our students to access interventions and supports no matter if they have a 504 IEP. So we always start with what interventions can we use first when a student is having a difficult time in a certain subject area. And that, again, is access to all students. Then we have our students that have 504 plans. They're protected, again, under ADA in Section 504. And again, that is for broader-based disability for students. And then we have IDEA, which is student-focused on individual specific students' specialized instruction plans. And remember in the video, and we'll restate, any student that has under an IEP under IDEA is automatically protected under 504.
So here we kind of look at some of the differences and how some of the similarities between the two laws that protect students. Again, a lot of words, a lot of acronyms in there. When we look at them, they're all important, but a couple that really pop out to me are federally mandated. So this is something that we as a local district don't get to choose. This is not something the state of Illinois gets to choose. It's a federal government, our federal government that set this plan in place. So there is some flexibility in interpretation of certain pieces. One of the things we'll talk about later, one of the examples of that would be transition planning. The state of Illinois requires us to begin transition planning at age 14 and a half. The federal requirements is 16. So anytime the state wants a more rigid guideline, they can do that, but they can't be more laxed than the federal code. So again, just another important piece. Individualized is the biggest key in my mind, and especially when we're talking about students with IEPs, like the whole thing, individualized education plan. So when we sit down and talk through an IEP meeting, one of the things that we are encouraging our staff to do is we're always talking about your son or daughter. Like that means about them. It's not about all the other variables. It's about them and how we can help them gain access to the learning environment. And then the last, I guess there's two other ones. FAPE, so there's one of our other big acronyms that I'm really proud to throw around. Free, appropriate public education. And that's, again, the access piece. Before 1975, it wasn't required. Kids, the door was shut, they weren't allowed to register, they weren't allowed to come to school. And most of the time, those were students that had more significant disabilities. So the law guarantees that they have access to a public education. And the last one that really pops out at me is we're required to educate your children in the least restrictive environment that's appropriate. So LRE is the coin term that we use on a regular basis. Our goal is to have all students in that general ed class with that general ed teacher with all of their typical peers. And then, so that's where we start. Anytime a new student transfers into the district, a student is going through the eligibility process, it's the first question that we're asking everyone is, what if we started them in the gen ed classroom? What does that look like? How can we provide the supports that we've identified through the evaluation process in that setting? And then we just kind of back up from there. So those are, in my vision, those are like the guiding practices that I would ask every time if we're up against a challenging situation, and really asking more questions about why we can't we get students supported in that least restrictive environment. We good so far? All right, anything else you want to add from this slide? Or just a good visual. Monica's really good at this. I don't know if you can see the quote from there or not. The upper left hand, you're not disabled by the disability. I'm sorry, you're not disabled by the disabilities you have. You're able by the abilities you have. And that's just a really powerful statement. Really powerful.
Are there any specific questions about the differences or similarities or the understanding between a 504 versus an IEP?
I'm sort of just between IDEA and IEP.
Good question.
So the good news is they're both the same. IDEA is the law, Individuals Disability Education Act is the law, and then IEP is the plan that's generated for your child.
So why was the 504, why was there IDEA inside it, as if they're all encompassed?
Because they're protected, students that have an IEP are protected under 504 as well too. Not that they necessarily need a 504 plan, but they're protected under law.
Yep.
Through that 504. Great question. So they naturally have a disability. So they're protected under both legally per that law, but not necessarily needing that 504 plan.
Okay.
Good question. So now we're going to get into more specific information into regards to kind of those acronyms that we discussed.
So going back to the acronym of FAPE again, Free Appropriate Public Education. Both the IEP and the 504 are legal documents. And as Jessica pointed out earlier, that's the tool that as kids leave high school that they can take with them to their college setting. The IEP doesn't have the same kind of weight, but it does help disability services at universities tease out how they can support that student in the education setting. A 504 is going to be something that they have to do. They have no choice because it's ADA, American Disabilities Act. So those things, that's where the difference comes. Because again, it goes back to the idea of instructional resources, which is of IEP is providing specific instruction, and a 504 provides access through accommodations. So,
And when you look
sorry.
at, when you hear the appropriate, we're using appropriate compared to just a same age typical developing peer. So we're not comparing it to our highest level kids in the class. It's just a typical same age peer developmentally. That's what an appropriate education would be.
Something that I hope everyone in this room has received. I saw the nice fancy booklet down at the end, which was the parents' resource guide from ISB. So that has every bit of information that a parent would want to know about IDEA in there without question, and it's pretty user friendly. On an annual basis, we're going to offer you a copy of your educational rights as parents. We're required to do that. So as some of you may look at us and go, you just gave it to me last year. Or if you have a high school age student, you're like, I've got that for 12 years. Why do I need another copy? We're required to do it. So that's why it's there. And just so you know that. And again, the goal behind that is, in my mind, to make sure we are able to have those conversations. Because it's okay if we disagree. And that document kind of tells you, disagree, it's okay. But disagree and have a conversation with the school so we can come to a resolution to support your student. So that's the guiding document for that.
And just know who your child's case manager is. You always want to, in that communication piece, we're always available, but that starting point of who is your child's case manager? So who oversees that IEP or that 504? Because that's going to be who you regularly communicate with. If you have questions, they see your child day in and out. So any questions that arise, please start and understand. Yep.
I don't know who mine
Oh,
is, and
no?
it's been
Okay.
3 years.
So the question was, how do we know who the case manager is? And I think sometimes, again, it goes back to terms and language we use. And my gut, and I don't know you and I don't know your child, but it could be your child's teacher that they spend most of their day with. And we may just be like, oh, that's my child, that's Johnny's teacher. Oh yeah, I know them, and we talk all the time, and they're at the IEP meetings. But I think that's something also that as a staff, sometimes we take for granted, that we just assume that everyone knows that because I spend all the time with them, I communicate home, everyone knows I'm the case manager. And when it gets to middle school and high school, that starts to look a little bit different as students transition between more classes sometimes. There's more adults that get involved in their kids' life because there's not that elementary classroom setting. So at the middle school and high school, I don't know what you would say our opinion of our work is currently, but I would say that's something we're constantly pushing to do, is we should be communicating with parents within the first couple of weeks of school to say, I'm your son or daughter's case manager. If you have questions about their progress, how they're transitioning to the high school, I can be one of those point people. So that's just a starting point.
And as a paper point, go ahead.
Should I just ask the teacher?
Yes.
Because every time we've had the meeting is, the teacher is, he gets special services, so also everybody who renders the services is there, so I really don't have like one to go to. So it should be the teacher?
Should be the teacher, yeah.
And not in every case, but if you go back and you look at that IEP, in most cases, it's going to be who signs in as that special education teacher.
Yep.
Now, if they're speech only, it's gonna be the speech therapist, something like that. But if you're not sure, just ask, and yeah, the school will be able to tell you that right away.
And just from a parent standpoint, I always email, like, the second day of school, just telling what the issues are with my daughter, and feel free to contact me however, just so everybody knows. And then I CC Donna, so she knows too. It just kind of makes it help, you know, kind of make that connection at the very beginning of the year.
And we greatly appreciate that. We, at the beginning of the year, as you know, we have a lot of students and we're transitioning, and sometimes caseload shifts and staff member shifts. So obviously it's our goal to communicate that, and we will work with our teams with that. But anytime you can reach out and be proactive as parents too, can help support in that communication. So feel free absolutely to reach out and just say, here's a little bit about my child. Please feel free to reach out to me as well.
And I think the other thing that we will constantly say is, as parents, you are a key member of that team. So most of the time, there's no way to over-communicate. Most of the time. There are situations when that happens, and then we work through that. But I would say if you're feeling like you're not getting enough communication, communicate. Push us to give you more. And I know that's a challenge, both on our side as school people, because of demands, but we also know that you have one major priority, and that is your son or daughter. So we get that, and sometimes we need to work on improving our communication. So please continue to let us know if you need more.
All right, just a little bit of what we talked about, what it consists of, but just kind of an overview. You're gonna know specifically what services are going to be on that 504 plan and the location of the service. So you're gonna know who's providing the service, if they're being pulled out for a test or they have an alternate setting, where are they going, how often, when is it occurring, why are we pulling them out, and that's just one example. If they need to go to the medical office for some type of for their disability, when are they going, how is it being implemented and monitored. So you want to leave that meeting understanding the process of, before I leave, what services are they getting, the location of the service, and this is just part of that 504 and IEP plan. It should be discussed as to what services will be consisting. Again, reasonable accommodations, just to throw out some, we can talk about preferential seating, extended time, breaks throughout the day, alternate location for test. We're going to have a specific parent meeting on accommodations and modifications, and we'll get into true detail about them, but just when you hear accommodations, what does that mean? It's changing how and not the what. So how are we accessing our information versus this is too much for somebody, so we're changing the vocabulary, and the content of it is the modification, and we'll get into more detail at a later parent meeting. We talked a little bit about what major life activities were impacted, and again, this is just a reference chart for you of what we're looking for at that 504 plan meeting. Again, we talked about some examples of disabilities within that 504 realm. It's more broad, so that to ensure through that American Disabilities Act that we are encompassing a broad range of disabilities. And again, we just kind of described accommodations change how, a student learns through the material, and a modification change what. When you're looking at a 504, you're leveling that playing field so they can access the general education curriculum. They're able to understand the curriculum with accommodations. They don't need that specially designed instruction that is different than the curriculum within that general education classroom. And just a little bit of a couple topics. You're looking at timing and schedule for accommodations. So do they need a flexible schedule, frequent breaks? You're looking at that timing and schedule piece on the 504 plan. We're also talking about setting. So when do they need that accommodation? Is it small group? Do they need headphones, study carrel, special seating? You're looking at how we can change this environment or setting so that they can access the information. Again, how we present. So again, we had a video. We're looking at visuals. I'm a visual learner, so we're looking at how can we present the information in different modalities so the student can learn. And again, we have our response. So can the student orally say the response versus writing? Do they have technology that they can do instead of writing physically? So different, how are they responding to the questions that they're presented to? And here's again a reference chart of examples of just basic classroom accommodations. And to be honest, we have so many great teachers that just naturally do this within their environment. So when I say, you know, calculator, they have calculators within their math program. When I say visual schedule, teachers have their schedule posted on the day as already. Preferential seating, they're going to naturally seat students that need to be closer to the board in one, and then who has distractions on the other side, away from distractions. So it's just good teaching practices, but sometimes it's, again, targeted to what the specific student needs through that 504 plan, but a lot of times it's already in place.
So just looking through factors that we consider during the evaluation and determine if a student's eligible, it's what that disability is and how significantly it impacts them. So these are questions we'll be asking. And as we look through this list, and Monica talked about it earlier, the second one, duration or expected duration of the impairment. So again, I break my arm or break my leg, it's not going to fit into either one of those components. I'm just looking through, we've talked a lot.
One component too is, once we have this accommodation plan, how do we ensure that the accommodations are really being implemented? We as staff members monitor those 504 IEP accommodations. It can look like in a variety of ways. So, you know, some people tally and have their charts, other people take notes, but we as, you know, the case managers or the team is monitoring, do they still need the accommodation? If they don't, we come back to the meeting and say, you know, based on our data, the student doesn't need it. Or we're noticing that at this time the student really has been benefiting from this and really needs this to access the curriculum. So we do monitor the accommodations and accommodation plans. And you might see those accommodations changing based on the content, the information, or from grade level to grade level as expectations increase. So those do change within the student's needs.
If a teacher doesn't follow the 504 plan, and you've nicely been emailing back and forth and trying to be, I mean, if it continues to not be followed and it's affecting their learning, who, as a parent, who do I go to after that?
I would contact the building administrator, so whether that was the assistant principal or the principal at the building.
And that's a great question, and starting that communication and communicating that is very important. And then also feel free again to call a meeting at any time. If we're not listening or if you're not being heard that you feel, please call a meeting at any time. But definitely getting more people involved at that point. So building administration, we have 2 coordinators at the elementary level. Now we have an assistant principal directly tied to student services at the middle school. But if you're not feeling that you're being heard or it's being implemented, please reach out to more team members within that team. Absolutely.
No, go ahead.
Is 504 plan everyone is in a mainstream classroom?
Typically, they're in a general education environment. So, yes, generally speaking, they are within the general education environment because they don't need specially designed instruction.
Okay.
We do have certain accommodations where through the accommodation they're able to take the test in a quiet environment because of their disability. They need access to that quiet environment for testing, let's say. But generally speaking, the least restrictive environment for a student with 504 is general education classroom. Correct.
My question is in regards to accommodations. As buildings, or what's the policy, do the regular teachers get a copy of the accommodations pages of the IEP and all the people that work with the child? Because, like she said, if a certain teacher isn't following it and others are, you know, we just want to make sure that we're documenting.
And that's when we, I'm sorry.
Going along with that, like the specials teachers, I found that might be something. If it needs more
Exactly,
communication,
yeah.
then the music teacher, the art teacher, and something happens, they're like, oh.
So I mean, I
to
guess
their
my
plan.
question is then, are I get the related service people, they're always with the case manager, and they're always at those meetings, and they communicate frequently, but like she said, the gym teacher, the music
Even like the
teacher.
lunch and the recess.
Exactly,
The
lunch and
supervisors.
recess, and I understand they don't need the copy of the whole IEP or
Right.
everything, but do they at least give the teachers the accommodations pages? Because sometimes I'll be honest, had teachers say,
In high school
oh,
they
are they supposed to have, what are their accommodations? I don't even know.
So
They're
I'm
like,
sorry.
oh, he has an IEP, but what does that mean?
That's a great question you asked, and I think there's a couple components to that question. One is at the IEP meeting, the team reviews where the accommodations will be in place and what classes and what parts of the school day that those accommodations are in place for. So if it's appropriate for your son or daughter to have the accommodations during PE, it'll be indicated that will be indicated on the IEP. If it's not appropriate, then that would be indicated such on the IEP as well. So at that team meeting, that's where we make that decision as a team, and then how is that information relayed? For 6 through 21, that's where I go back to like the case manager's responsibility, and that's who it falls on. Is the case manager is to share that information with all of those students' teachers. Again, it's not the whole IEP for lots of reasons, but the accommodations specifically, how they're going to be implemented. And when we talk about IEPs, we're often also could be talking about modifications as well. And the special education teacher is responsible for making those modifications. The gen ed teacher is not. They're responsible for implementing, but the special ed teacher, that is their role. That's why they went to school. That's what their background is how to make those accommodations and modifications for that gen ed setting. And they will work with that general ed teacher to implement those. Again, if there's concerns about that, I think one, just reaching out to the case manager is probably the first place to start, just because that's your child's best advocate in the school setting. So let's start there, and then again, as Monica talked about, if there's a need, request an IEP meeting, and then we can move from there.
I just think because like my son has reading issues, even though he doesn't need like an aide or somebody with him, like say for example in PE, music and art, he can get through the general part of it. But I just want to make sure that those accommodations of when they do those reading, math, or music and art assessments, which they do now, that he's getting the accommodation of having it read to him because he's in that regular ed setting without a paraprofessional.
Yep. And PE, I think, is a great example of that. I think, 20 years ago.
He's taking a soccer test and he's like, Mom, I didn't know any of the questions.
That's
what do you do?
yeah.
Like, well, did you try your best? I mean, what else do you say at that point?
And I think that's a really good example. 20 years ago, I think a lot of PE was you just went and you did PE. There wasn't the academic piece that's brought in to the level it is now. So I think making sure PE teachers know what that looks like when a student has to take a test, or they're given a worksheet and they're supposed to fill it out or work through it. And I would say, as with many things, those are things I wouldn't on it, but the more we talk about it, the better we can get. Mm-hmm. Good.
The last kind of question is just, I'm sure, thought process of, okay, my child has ADHD. How do I know if it's a 504 IEP? Basically, our intent at this meeting was for you to just get that background knowledge of thought process of 504, again, general education classroom with accommodations. He or she does not need that specially designed instruction that's different from the core curriculum that every other kid is getting. You might need accommodations of how and what it looks like, but versus that IEP, my kid has ADHD and highly distractible to the severity and degree of he needs a completely different, separate environment, curriculum, just that specially designed instruction. So that's a little bit about the differences. You're looking at severity and basically the learning need between that IEP and 504.
And just to kind of, one of the things to accentuate there is the idea of specialized instruction. That's in addition to what every gen ed kid gets. So when we're thinking about that student that has attention deficit disorder and they have a hard time attending to task, what that specific instruction may be, it may not be what you're typically thinking of. it may be, when we think about a middle school student, it may be teaching them how to self-monitor. So that's the specific instruction. It's not necessarily about math or reading. It's about doing something to make a difference with their disability, to kind of close that gap on how kids self-monitor independently. So that, I think, is the other thing just to keep in mind, is we're looking to provide services to help a student compensate for their disability.
All right. So again, you guys are your biggest advocates for your child, as are we, but how can you support your child? So just as we sit here and talk about different disabilities, you know your child's strengths, weaknesses, and needs. Bring that to the IEP meeting. So oftentimes we talk about everything that's happening in the educational world, and we don't know what's going on in the home environment so much. So bring that in. If you're having a difficult time with distractibility at home, or maybe you have a strategy that's working at home that you can communicate to us, well, oh, we do this and this is really helpful. Bring that into the IEP meeting, because that's very important for us to know. Again, collaborate and communicate with your child's team. Again, we encourage that collaboration and communicate. Explore some supports and accommodations that work for your child at home. So again, what strategies have you tried at home? Have you given them time to, take a break, and that break seems to be helping? Bring that back to the team. Say, yeah, I allow them to take a 2-minute break just to process and unwind. That seems to help. Oh, great, we can do that in our educational environment. Again, that homework piece, times have changed even with homework, so that's a difficult component, and oftentimes it's students with disabilities, just that processing time. They need more time to process. And if you're having a difficult time with that homework piece, communicate again to your special education or your teacher. Listen, they're having a difficult time. We're spending hours and hours at night. We can come back with different strategies and supports to ensure that, because the last thing we want is for them to go home. And obviously it's going to be challenging and difficult, but to what degree and severity? We don't want them up till midnight every night, frustrated because they're not truly learning at that point. So communicate to us as to what can we do to help, because we have different strategies and supports that we can offer suggestions at home to work with. Outside resources, again, this is a great thing that we will be specifically talking about at one of our meetings too. Oftentimes you feel, I need more support, I need more resources, and there are a variety of resources within McHenry County and other counties that we can access and utilize to better support your family and your child. So we will be targeting those outside resources within a different session, but that's also important to build a network within our community, but also know who you can access and what you can access to help within your family.
With that, the other thing too, those resources are going to look different for each of us, and the extent of those resources might be different as well. While some families will be pushed or strongly encouraged to make connections with certain agencies, because we know, based on what we know about students with similar needs, that there's some lifelong things that we want to help you begin planning for. And that doesn't involve all parents. It doesn't involve all kids. But that's something, again, at 14 and a half, we have to start talking about it. But realistically, for some students, 14 and a half is a little bit late. Be talking about connections into your community. So those will be some conversations as we move through the community, or the parent committee network meetings we'll talk more about, but also through your IEP teams, those will be more conversations that should be coming up. And again, if you have questions, one of the questions earlier was, how is my child going to get a job? Or I'm uncertain if they'll be able to get a job. Those are great questions that you shouldn't have to deal with by yourself. So your IEP team may not have that answer in that moment of who that resource is, but I am confident in every one of our buildings, there's someone within that building that has answers to where you could start making connections in the community. So please use those resources.
And then we put in several resources for you, and you'll see like an example 504. It's not Huntley's 504, it's just a broad example of what the 504 plan would look like. And again, some other charts of comparisons of 504s. Again, you'll see it's a lot of information, but they're just reference charts for you. And again, we'll put them on the website as well. We also included, we are going to be implementing IEP agendas so that you know when you come to the meeting, what type of meeting is it, what's the purpose, what should you specifically be looking for at the meeting so that you can be on the same page when we discuss certain topics. So just a couple of housekeeping things about the information you received. Just some reference guides.
And the goal with that is so you know what to expect. Like, one of the things that I think is something we want to make sure is clear is that you are welcome at those meetings. You are part of that team. And I think just the nature of school sometimes doesn't necessarily always set up that environment where we are equal partners. We are equal partners when it comes to your student. It's a challenge sometimes, I think, for everyone. But we all have something that we have our expertise in, and you have your expertise as the parent of that child, of your child. So we need that at that team meeting. If we go back to just some more details in regards to IEPs and eligibility, those are the 8 different domains: academic achievement, functional performance, cognitive functioning, communication status, health, hearing and vision, motor abilities, and social emotional. And when you sit down at the eligibility meeting, as the team goes through those, someone may say, we don't have anything to worry about with communication status because your child can communicate just fine. And that's great. And so the team will be like, we don't need to collect any information. He or she is typical to their peers. So that's an example of that. The 13 disability categories are listed there. And so again, they're available on ISBE. We'll have them up on the website as well. And each of them have a definition that goes with them and criteria. So when you're at the eligibility meeting, that criteria will be gone over. There's only one eligibility that you're required to, well, I'm saying that kind of out of context, but when we go through the eligibility paperwork, a specific learning disability is the only one that the whole team has to sign and say that we agree or disagree that your son or daughter has a specific learning disability. The other 12 categories, it's just a matter of all the data supports that team's decision. So there's just a little bit of a variance. So an example being, if your child has autism, no one signs saying that we all agree the child has autism. We will ask you to consent to those services being provided at the end, meaning that we all agree that this is why we're going to provide services based on what we know about your son or daughter. So it's just a little caveat. Adverse effect, again, and we've talked a lot about that, impacts his or her learning and requires specially designed instruction.
That specific learning disability, there was a shift in where we used to qualify them under an academic achievement, a certain test that we used, and the educational system shifted to now using a response to intervention approach. Not that it's the end-all be-all. We can use academic testing, and oftentimes we use both, where we have specific testing to support that specific learning disability, and/or we have a lot of information and data from our response to intervention. Because we know that on one given day, if I give one given test and am qualifying someone based off one given test, it can get a certain day, it could have a good day, it could have an off day, and so we shifted to a culture of let's try different interventions and supports. Let's figure out what specific areas of disability. So that's a little shift, which then led to okay, now we're signing off saying the interventions weren't enough. At this time, the interventions, the progress and rate that they were making did not close the gaps enough, and so they need that specially designed instruction. So that's just a little bit of shift of a certain given test to qualify versus now we're looking globally at what interventions and tools we've provided to the students for a period of time. RTI cannot be that stopping gate as to they haven't had RTI, so that's not an option for specific learning disability.
When will you be sharing that information with the rest of the district? Because they are strongly under the impression that that is how it works.
Which?
That you cannot get an evaluation until you've been through RTI.
So by federal law, that's not true.
I know, but they don't believe me. So that's my question.
And I think one of the things that we would want to, I don't want to ignore that statement. I can't. Monica and I, and actually the whole SPAD administrative team has walked in as of July 1. So I can't change what's happened in the past, but as we...
Less than 2 weeks ago, so it is current.
So, and which is good. Thank you for sharing that. That's a conversation that we need to continue to have, and based on, right now we're not going to speak to it, but we definitely want to look into that more. And I think the other piece is if you're not happy with the decision that building came to, reaching out to, if the principal was part of that meeting, then you would want to reach out to the district office. If the principal was not part of that meeting, I would encourage you to go to the principal first before reaching out to the district office to have that discussion. So.
Yeah, and I'll speak on that a little. I think sometimes practices change in people's interpretation of how laws or different procedures come out from ISB or things like that. And so in the past, I think parents knew a lot of times it could come from the team. It may be something that the teacher saw, it could be something that the parents saw at home. And so in that collaboration or communication, I do know in some of the more recent past years, and that may be depending on too, as we said, this is a new administrative team here. One of the things that they're making sure is that they're going out and sharing what their vision and their procedures are. And so maybe that was somebody following a past practice on that, was that if I wrote a letter saying I'd like my child evaluated, used to be, okay, yep, within so many days we'd respond to that, and that would start the process. And I know that there's just different perceptions on there of, okay, as a team, the team should be sitting down and looking at determining that. Now the team may say, no, but if a parent is really strongly, hey, I need more data on this, I need this. But I think we're hearing from our administrative team here is that, yeah, they want that information from parents. And so to please do that. And we will continue as a group here to make sure that we're letting staff know that in a building. Because if a case manager is talking to me as a parent and that was maybe a past practice or something that had been, they may be, responding to a parent that way. We do, again, it's just perception and all of that, of how they interpret that conversation or they changes in laws and things. But we definitely want this to be a collaborative approach, and parents' input is extremely important in that. So we will continue to push that and communicate that out there.
Sometimes as a team, they have all the data and they have the parent or the team meetings, and at sometimes the student hasn't had any interventions or not enough data to really show that discrepancy. So it could be offered as to, hey, we really want to try this intervention to gather more data and information. So, I'm looking at it from the team, because we have a wonderful professional team and staff members who are very invested and their hearts are in this for the right reason. So I also want to look at it from the staff's point of, sometimes it's just wanting to collect more data and information to determine whether or not, what the next step is. However, what we always say within our communication is, under IDEA, you always have a right as a parent to ask for to request an evaluation, and you need to be heard and you need to be listened to, and that's the part that we will work on, collaborating with how we can work together as a team to address your needs, and work, again, that team approach. Listening to our educated team saying, yes, but can we try this intervention first? Not that we want to go years and years and years, that's not our point either, but sometimes it's just, hey, we want to try this intervention and support for a little bit to gather more data and information. So it's just those discussions too, and that's where you come in. How long? What are we looking at? Ask those good probing questions, because again, we can't, if we talk about past practice, we're never going to move forward. And our goal and our direction is that we work on increasing the capacity within a large district. So we are working through the structure, the systems, and how we can communicate that. But again, we're a partnership, and your voice is heard. And if that evaluation, that request comes from, you have that right under IDEA. With that being said, we want the team to have that discussion too, because they work with your child day in and day out. So just, I always look at it from both sides too, and they do want what's best for the child as well too.
Can I ask a question, just as you look at the 13 disabilities
Mhm.
identified up there? Okay, so a good majority are going to be the specific learning disability. So as we say, terms and acronyms, all those things change. So that's not listed up there, that would be listed under intellectual disability then, is that correct?
No.
No, that was an error.
Or is it not, just not written up?
It's just not. Yep. It's gone. Since it's error, it's totally gone now. It's totally gone. You're right. It should be up there. I'm not sure why it's not.
And why is that the only one that it has to be signed off on?
It kind of goes back to what Monica was talking about, is because the team's agreeing that a number of things have been in place, and those items would be interventions have taken place. We're looking at many moments in time to evaluate if a student needs additional support. We're looking at what resources have been used to get the student to that level, and does this get to a point that's greater than what other students need. And it's just not as clear cut, so it has to be a team discussion.
And I think when we look at, qualifying and determining somebody with a disability, we want to make sure we have all that data and information. So when we're identifying they have a specific learning disability, we want to be able to identify through data, through information, how are we determining that, right? What information are we determining? And again, we're looking at a significant, and that's in the criteria, significantly impact. So what does significant mean? So when you talk about a student that's half a year or a year below, we can close that gap through, again, some RTI and interventions. When you talk about 2.5 to 3, now we're looking at different data and what we've done to close that gap. So just those discussions on what is the significant impact. Your significant, my significant as a parent is they're below and they need help right now, right? That's just how I look at it as a parent, right? And our significant is, but wait, we can try these interventions and supports first, and if it's 6 months, a year, we can close those gaps. Again, that's where the significant in our data needs to come in to show what are we doing, ask those good questions, when will I know, how long are we doing this for, and again, be a part of that team. Come in for those meetings. Can you tell me how's the intervention working, how long has it been in place? So I think that direction between the shift in how we identified specific learning disability guided that signature page, as we all agree that we're not just using one point of measure to identify you have a specific learning disability. We're using multiple measures, and we've all analyzed and reviewed the data.
So Monica, just so I know, too, you guys are no longer using the discrepancy model where it's the discrepancy between ability and achievement. You guys are just using RTI.
It's not the discrepancy between the IQ, which is a number. So in the past they used that discrepancy model of an IQ number compared to a typical same age peers.
Yeah.
We're not using that number anymore. We're using the discrepancy between same age peers' performance and where they're compared to, and that's per law, that's per the legal change, not our, vision or mission, that's per legal. So not that number anymore. You might have heard, well, there's significant discrepancy, they're at 75 and, the norm is 85. That would have been, the norm was an 85 and 115. We're not using those numbers anymore. We're using compared to same age peers within your classroom. Where are they developmentally? Are they at 1 year below? Can we provide interventions and supports? Or are they now, is that gap not closing and the gap's getting bigger?
Why did they make that change?
Question?
That's a great question. Some of
It's confusing now because I have a child that's coming up for a 3-year reeval, and the old ed, like the other model has, these are his scores. It's average, below average, above average, whatever. Well,
some of those scores will still could probably be present, but one of the main test factors was an IQ score. There is an excessive amount of research out there that that IQ testing is not a valid instrument because it was normed or practiced on a very specific population, and not a lot of people fit into that box. So we were coming up with scores that were not appropriate or not an accurate reflection of a student. And the discrepancy model was based on that IQ score. So if we use dead average at 100, and then I took a math test, and my math score was 75, I was eligible as a kid with a learning disability in the area of math. And so historically, what that meant now is I went from a general ed setting to a very restrictive setting in a classroom where I'm not getting gen ed instruction anymore. And instead of closing that gap, we more than likely probably made a bigger gap. So what we're looking at today is it important sometimes to know that a functioning level? We're going to look at more than just an IQ score. There's a lot of other assessments that will be used to help us get a bigger picture of who a student is, and then we can make a better, more educated decision about that. We're still going to use a lot of norm reference tests. One of our non-favorite words right now is Ames probes, and some of you may have heard of that. And if you haven't, good. If you haven't heard about it, that's really good, actually. But it's just an instrument that we use to track data or to see where a student's functioning. MAP scores could be another data point that's used. And we use that as the bigger comparison piece. But then as kids are coming up for reevaluations, we're looking more at what are we doing to close that gap? And do we still need to do all that extensive amount of instruction, accommodating, modifying? Because that's what's really now proving that a kid continues to need to be eligible for specialized instruction, if that makes sense. The initial one kind of looks a little bit different than the reeval because we have already proved that we know that there was a big need, I guess is the best way to put it, at that initial evaluation. But then as we move down the road, the question is, does the student still need it?
Yeah, the idea is to get to transitioning.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Yes.
Autism's up there.
Yep.
Autism can be very high IQs.
Mm-hmm.
But processing level is really slow.
Could be. Mm-hmm.
And because of accommodations, hopefully that gap is short. But sometimes you'll have kids where those accommodations are not being fulfilled. And just because he's got that higher IQ, does that toss him out of being able to get some more resources?
So that's a tricky question.
Yeah.
Because, and this goes back to eligibility for specialized instruction, is if I meet the criteria, that's one part of the IDEA eligibility piece. The second piece is I have to need specialized instruction. What adverse effect is that disability causing on my achievement or my access to that gen ed curriculum? If we see, and here's one side and the other side, if we see that the student's able to access the curriculum and is making average progress, that's a student that's doing well and may not need any specialized support whatsoever. Do they still have a disability? They do, but they've compensated for it and they've been able to make those, either they've been taught or they've figured it out on their own, so they may not need that kind of specialized instruction or accommodations. The other side of that is I'm not making progress. I haven't caught up to my peers and there's a bigger gap. So now we're looking at what kind of supports we need, and maybe that's specialized instruction. Or maybe it's not, and I just need the accommodation of additional time, and now it's a 504 plan. So again, the piece that we talked about a little bit ago was it's really individualized. And if it's not, then we're making a mistake. So we don't want to ever lump kids with one label into a group. That's not the way it works.
We've had students who have had autism and maybe have had accommodations and services in one area and also have been in the gifted program.
Yep.
And receiving gifted math or whatever
Mhm.
it is. So it really is tailored to what is their specific need. And so absolutely, they can be excelling in that one area and really doing well, as you talked about with some of the IQ. And we want to be able to do that as well as support maybe some of the other areas of need that they have.
Absolutely.
So I want to apologize before anyone else says anything else. We broke one of our ground rules. It's now 6 o'clock, so we didn't give you guys those 15 minutes to network as parents with each other, so I apologize for that. You're more than welcome to stay. I think we covered just about everything in our PowerPoint. So at this point, I think if there's other specific questions, we're more than happy to field those. And at this point, probably the best idea would be the Post-it notes. So then a lot of those questions, even from tonight's discussion, the good thing about recording it, we can go back and pick up some of those common questions that we can add to the frequently asked questions page that will be coming to the website. So there'll just be another resource for parents.
So is this a month, what is this a monthly?
That's our goal.
Did this used to happen? I'm a kindergartner.
So one of the things that Monica and I were talking about is we know this is important. We feel it's important to us to have connections with parents. We also think it's really important for our community to have a network for parents to be able to come to. And I think we feel it's our responsibility to be an initiator of that. So we've set up a monthly meeting. The list was sent out. Did we print out copies of it for tonight? Yep. There's copies that are in the back. We'll also be sending out some reminders as they come up. The time frame, there's going to be some evening ones and there's going to be some during the school day. Our goal is to live stream them all. So the cool thing with the live streaming as well is they'll be archivable, I believe. So even if you can't see it in that moment, you'll be able to get access to it later. And our goal is, again, we don't know what is the exact best time, and I think the reality is there is no best time for everyone. So we're trying to meet as many needs as we can.
At 8 o'clock, the kids aren't even in school.
8 a.m. again, yeah. I mean, some parents prefer,
Yeah.
based on the survey, some parents wanted morning, some parents wanted evening, so I think there's maybe 3 or 4 a.m. and most of them are evening. Again, we'll live stream it and or have that on the website for you to access as well. Also, I know some of you, we're sending out via email the information on what the session looks like, but also you'll notice a survey link, and that's important because that survey asks you questions to prepare for the meeting. So we got, I think, 3 questions back, but that helped us to address, there was one about ADHD, there was one about the differences between IEP and 504. So that survey, while it says survey, it's more of put your questions down for us so that we can address them or put them in the FAQ packet for parents to reference too.
And where did this come from? I didn't.
So
Receive it? Yeah.
currently how we're sending information out is
It's Alert Solution, you'll get an email from D158
Yep.
alerts at district158.org. Some people's emails send that right to spam because that email isn't a known one. So kind of take a peek in there, and then you guys can maybe help me here. There's a way that you can
unspam
let
it.
your email know that that's
Yeah.
an okay email to do that.
And I would say, I would be willing to wager that Monica and I will send a survey with everything that we send out, because we're looking for a way to get as much feedback from you guys as possible. If you get tired of the surveys, you just don't fill it out. But it's an avenue for us to be able to reach a large volume of parents at one time. But we're always more than happy to hear phone calls, emails, personally to us as well.
And just to piggyback off that, we will actually have resources within our district, so we're not always going to be up here talking.
Yeah.
We'll have specialty areas. So again, we have one on assistive technology. We're going to have our assistive technology experts in the field discuss certain topics. So again, for the resources, outside resources, we're going to call outside resources and have whoever's available come in. So just the knowing the different topics, it won't always be us discussing everything.
I have one more question. Homebound instruction, is that through the IEP 504, or is that something totally separate?
So that's not an easy answer. Yeah. When we think about the special ed world, homebound is the most restrictive setting there is. So the team has to make that decision.
This is more for physical.
Mm-hmm. I thought that's where you're going, but so as far as that goes, there's a different set of procedures to follow within your building. Yeah.
When my son was in first grade, they sent me out like emails, and even the teachers had like flyers that they would invite me. And once they invited me to a program that they had where a lawyer was going to come in and talk about, you know, where they would stand. Well, at that point, I didn't think my son was delayed.
Sure.
So I walked out, I didn't know. I tried emailing, who emailed me at that time and never got a response. Is that something like what you guys are gonna have later on?
Mhm.
That's great.
Do those flyers, I mean, we're looking at various ways, so we can send that email out. In the past, I think sometimes those flyers went out and we heard from parents that maybe they were getting them too late, or they went home in the backpacks with their children, and depending on the age, they didn't get home. And so, if that is another means, we can
Yeah.
communicate in both ways, if you think that would hit more families or more parents.
Well, that helps, because a lot of what came didn't pertain to us, or, you know, it wasn't, so, I just tossed it.
Sure.
But, you know, when there was something that I thought would be helpful,
Yeah.
you know, I clearly saw that sometimes when you get an email, it's like, I'll see it later, and it keeps getting shoved.
Sure. We can do both methods, yeah.
Thank you for doing this. Yes, thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
And bring a friend next time.
Yeah, that's the goal.